This week on Quality Digest Live, we talk to Stanley Chow, author of Selling to China, about the China-U.S. trade war and what type of planning companies should be considering. And we take a look at some web-based management system software. That and more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by the ISO 9001 Group. The ISO 9001 Group, developers of Conformance Manager, is a full-service consulting, auditing, and training firm, helping organizers increase profits and reduce risks.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 25th, 2019. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. Well, most of you, somehow, somewhere, have China as a buyer of your products or of your components, or maybe they're in your supply chain somewhere. So what does the current trade war between China and the United States mean to you? Our guest today is Stanley Chow, author of Selling to China, a guide for small and medium-sized businesses. He is also the managing director of All In Consulting, which assists Western companies in their China business strategies. Thanks for joining us today, Stanley.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today,
Sure.
Dirk.
Well, before we get started talking about the current trade situation between China and the United States, why don't you give us kind of the 30-second, 1-minute speech of what All In Consulting does? What do you guys do?
Sure. We're based in Los Angeles, and we help Western companies in their business strategies. We started in the early 2000s, and at that time a lot of the projects were outsourcing, and it's kind of shifted now to where we're doing a lot of selling into China. So we're helping Western companies establish sales offices, manufacturing plants, finding partners, and doing market studies. So that's basically what we do.
Okay. Well, you recently wrote an article for us titled Make Some Tweaks in Your China Business Strategy. And I'm assuming that given today's ongoing and still unresolved trade war with China, that a lot of companies are doing more than simply tweaking. But before we get into that, let's talk about China a bit. I have something I pulled up from Forbes here. Naeem Aslam, Chief Market Strategist for Think Markets in London and a Forbes contributor, told Forbes this quote, that if you need any evidence now that the trade spat is impacting a country's economic health, then look no further than China trade. The lower export number, he was referring to China's export numbers. The lower export numbers mean lower jobs, which means another direct impact on the Chinese economy. Donald Trump can be pleased. His policies have brought China to its knees. So is there any truth in that? Is this trade war really, from your perspective and your dealings, is it really impacting China? Is it having this impact of bringing China to its knees? Do they really notice all that much?
Not really. I see this slowdown as a kind of a world economic slowdown that would have happened with or without Trump. Trump is just taking advantage of it right now. A lot of the slowdown has actually started before Trump. You know, in my business, we're mostly helping companies go to China, but a lot of our work now is actually helping companies kind of drift away from China. They're not looking at buying cheap components, raw materials. They're asking us to now look in Indonesia, Malaysia, other developing countries. So I've been seeing the slowdown already for the past two, 3 years. So it's not totally on Trump, but he's certainly taking advantage of the the current downturn.
Okay, well, you say in your article that even though you fully expect China and the U.S. to come to some sort of agreement on this, that you still think that there is a possibility, I think in your words you say, a full-blown economic Cold War breaking out during the next 3 to 5 years. What does that look like? When you say that, what do you mean? What does an economic Cold War look like from your perspective?
Okay. It means China will have some sort of mandate saying that they don't want to buy from the U.S. And it's going to drift across the consumer base. Chinese are very patriotic people. In many ways, maybe more so than Americans, because it's such a homogeneous group of people, society. So you're going to have U.S. companies suffering in China, I believe, in the next 3 to 5 years. You're going to see people not going into Starbucks, not buying Nike shoes, not buying Tiffany jewelry, and not buying Apple phones. And you're already starting to see that. Some people are saying it's because of the economic downturn that iPhones aren't selling well. I'm actually seeing now that a lot of Chinese consumers are making choices and saying, boy, America hates us. Why do I want to go out and buy an Apple phone? I'll buy a Samsung or a Huawei. And speaking of Huawei, you have the current arrest of the CFO.
Which was kind of a black eye for, wasn't that kind of a black eye for China?
Yes, it's seen as a black eye. It's seen as a they're losing face right now because of this arrest, and you're going to have a lot of this tit for tat. You know, Americans are going to go after Huawei now for cyber espionage, IP theft. You're going to see the Chinese doing the same for American companies, General Motors, Boeing, Microsoft. Any major company that's doing business in there could be subject to this economic full-blown trade war that I'm predicting in the next 3 to 5 years. In other words, things are not going to get better. On a temporary basis, you might see things kind of waning, getting better in the next year, but definitely in the next 5 years, I see things getting worse.
Well, with that in mind then, what are you recommending to your clients, I don't know, maybe short-term or long-term? What are your recommendations? Should they be staying in China? Should they be looking elsewhere? What are you telling them?
Yeah. You definitely still want to stay in China. I've for the past 25 years, I've told clients that China is the place to be. But the reasons you're in China are going to change. So in the 90s and early 2000s, you need to be in China to outsource, to buy cheaper products, components. And then as we drift now to the past 5-6 years, you want to be in China because you want to sell to the consumer base there, to the 1.4 billion people. As we move forward now, not only do you want to be in China to serve 1.4 billion people, I'm predicting that you're going to have two regional spheres of influence, two economic trading zones. Now, China is implementing its one road, one belt policy, where it's trying to develop a trading zone for 70 countries. So you're going to have one zone where China is going to be the center, and it's going to encompass 70 to 100 countries. And you're going to have another zone, which is going to be U.S. as the center, and that'll encompass North America, South America, Western Europe. So you need to be in China, you need to manufacture in China to serve China's sphere of influence. You won't be necessarily bringing those products you make back from China back to the US, which means you also are going to need a center of excellence, a manufacturing facility, maybe in the US, somewhere in North America, to handle that second sphere of influence. So it's still important to be in China.
Okay. You mentioned the One Belt, One Road, and I believe there's also China 2025.
Right.
So are you saying that both of those, well, One Belt, One Road for sure, but maybe China 2025, those are going to open up opportunities for Western companies?
Yes, yes, because China doesn't want to rely on Western technology for software, robotics, AI. They want to develop these products domestically.
Which is the purpose of China 2025, I believe, right?
Which is that's exactly correct. They don't want to be importing Western technology. So what does a Western company have to do to participate in the Chinese market and that second sphere of influence? You have to turn yourself into a Chinese company. So not only do you have a U.S. headquarters, but you're going to have to have a Chinese headquarters with a staff with Chinese employees, a Chinese CEO, and you will register yourself as a local company.
So you're saying that a Western company, even under China 2025, a Western company might still supply those, robotics and high-tech items to China as long as they're under some sort of Chinese CEO. I mean, they could be a U.S. company, but they would need to have Chinese CEO, Chinese leadership. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Do you see Western companies, the ones you deal with, is that something that they're willing to swallow?
They are, but you have to approach it differently. I've always told companies going into China, because of the IP theft potential, technology transfer issues, you have to be very careful what technology you're going to deliver. Don't always bring your latest state-of-the-art technology. Maybe bring your second generation, third generation line. I also do predict in the next 5 years that IP protection is going to be modernized in China. Okay. That is something that they are trying to change, because the Chinese realize if you want to develop and build things in China, you're still going to have to attract Western companies to come to set up locally.
Okay, and finally, last question here. What kind of deal do you think this administration, the U.S. administration, and the Chinese are going to arrive at in the short term here? I mean, obviously there's going to have to be some sort of compromise made. What do you see happening?
I don't see a whole lot happening in March, but it's going to be enough to kind of wane this economic trade war. The Chinese are going to promise to buy more products. I think you're going to see some large Boeing orders, Caterpillar, Deere products being bought, more soybeans, more natural gas, which is going to cut down the trade imbalance. They're also going to enact some laws. They're talking about a foreign investment law right now, which is going to protect foreign IP, and it's going to stop foreign companies from having to transfer technologies. So you're going to have a lot of these very general lip service type laws enacted, but it's not going to have any real core substance that a Western company can take and file a lawsuit in China. But it's going to be enough for Trump to say, look, I won. China are going to buy more stuff. They're going to allow foreign companies to go in without transferring technologies, and we're going to be able to enforce the IP theft. On the other side, I think Trump's going to relax. You're not going to see so much of this rhetoric on Huawei. The tariffs will go back to its pre-tariff war phases. And in general, both presidents, both countries will come out happy, and they'll kick the can down the road again, saying we're going to continue our discussions and have some more announcements in the next 6 months. But the real issue here is China just wants to get out of this temporary mess into 2020, and hopefully they're hoping that Trump gets outvoted, he won't be president, and then China can kind of go back to what they were doing beforehand. And Trump is doing this to just declare a win in March. And as he gets into 2020, he's worried about his presidential election, and China is not going to be in the forefront anymore.
Okay.
That's kind of how I see things playing out.
All right. Okay, well, Stanley Chow, Managing Director of All In Consulting and author of Selling to China, a guide for small and medium-sized businesses. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Okay, terrific. And you can find Stanley's book, Selling to China, on Amazon. Of course, his article, Make Some Tweaks in Your China Business Strategy, appeared on Quality Digest this past Wednesday. All right, and we have a tech corner for you today, a software tech corner brought to you by the ISO 9001 group. We're going to look at Conformance Manager. This is a web-based management system software that helps you maintain your management system records, track your training, NCRs and CAPAs, equipment maintenance, and a whole lot more, all in one easy-to-use interface. If we go to our screen right here, I'll show you what this looks like. So I mentioned that this is web-based. You can see this is Conformance Manager. The first thing you're going to see is a dashboard. So the nice thing about this is when you first log on to this with a web browser, and by the way, you can access this using a phone, a tablet, or a PC, whatever. First thing you're going to see on the home page is your dashboard, which gives you a lot of information. Here we've got, let's say, our NCRs by month. This is configurable, by the way. NCRs by category, by department, FMEAs by type, risk by probability, incidents by month, equipment past due. A lot of information right at your fingertips, right on the home screen right there. And the other thing I want to show you is just the very simple interface that they've got here that really makes this easy to use. And I got to say, one of the things with management system software, a lot of you out there may be using, I don't know, Excel, or maybe you're using Microsoft Word or Microsoft Access, or maybe you're up on the cloud and you're using Google Drive or Google Docs or Google Sheets to handle your management system. Those things work, right? I mean, you can do it that way, but you're not getting the benefits that you can reap from using software that's actually designed to handle a management system. That's what Conformance Manager is. It is software that's designed to handle a management system. It's not kludged together like what honestly some of you might be doing out there. So as I'm going through these features, be thinking about what you're doing currently and how something like this might really help you out, how it might be a lot easier and provide you a lot more benefit to what you're currently doing. So when we look at the interface here, very simple set of menus. We got 8 menu items: admin, employees, pretty self-explanatory; document control, explanatory; requirements, compliance, equipment, monitoring, and of course reports. And I want to dig into each of these a little bit. So if we go to our admin tab, admin is basically where you set up everything related to the context of your organization. So you might input your departments, all of your positions, your employees, equipment, equipment makes, equipment models. Essentially, you're pre-populating all of the information that is going to be used in drop-down menus later on, as we'll see, so that when your employees log in to use this, they're not constantly having to type in common information. If an employee is required to be filled in on a form, well, there's going to be an employee drop-down menu, or a department drop-down menu, or an equipment drop-down menu, so that they don't constantly have to type this in. So that's basically what you're doing in the admin section. But there's one thing I want to point out. We're going to go into this a lot, and that is the ability to set up reminders. One of the important aspects of Conformance Manager is that it wants to, or its goal is to help you drive ownership and follow through on any of the tasks that show up in your management system. So, ownership and follow through. How do you get people to take responsibility for the tasks that they're assigned? Well, one way is to set reminders. So if we go into the admin screen here and we look at a reminders area, I can set up periodic reminders, or I can set up one-off reminders, a particular day, next month. And when I set up a reminder, two things happen. Number one, at 60 days out, 30 days out, and 15 days out from the due date on that reminder, that person is going to be sent an email automatically. I don't have to set that up. Their email is in there. As soon as you assign them a reminder and a task, they're going to start automatically getting email reminders, and that task is going to show up in their task list. If we go to the top of the screen, you can see we've got a little button up there. I'm logged in as Bob. So Bob has 77 tasks waiting for him, because Bob's a slacker and he hasn't been doing his tasks, so he's got a lot waiting for him. But when Bob does start getting on the ball, he can start going through these tasks and marking off how complete he is on each of those tasks. And once he finishes them, he can mark them as complete. They will leave his task list. So anytime a reminder is set, or a follow-through is set up, reminders and tasks are going to be automatically generated by Conformance Manager. Now let's dive into some of the the everyday functions. If we go to employees, a couple things that leap out is training. Training is an important part of any management system. First thing we got here is our training matrix. Very quickly, training matrix is just a way to assign specific types of training to specific positions. So for a buyer, you might say a buyer needs to take QMS overview training, quality policy training, control of nonconformities training, and so forth. And you could do that for any position. But more important, more useful, I think, is when you go to the training register shows you what training has been completed by any particular employee. And I can drill into each employee. Like right now, we're looking at all of the employees, but I can just use my drop-down menu. Remember, this is pre-populated. I can bring up just Shelley, and I can see that Shelley has completed QMS overview. She's completed purchasing procedures. She's completed control of nonconformities. Here's the training provider. Here is the date that training was provided, and here is the expiration date for that training. Some training is only good for a year. You might need to be recertified every year, so you could input an expiration date for a particular training, which would remind you that person is coming up for maybe recertification. Let's look at document control. Important part of any management system is all the documents that are part of your management system, and that would show up here on this screen. So on this screen we're seeing a lot of different documents. I can fill as many in here as I want, but let's take a look at this first one here. What we got, quality policy. If we look at the quality policy, here's the overview of it, but here is the actual document itself. So this could be a Word document, Excel document, doesn't matter. I would click on that document, it would open up that document in my system, and I would have, let's say, that procedure right in front of me, and it's going to be the latest procedure. I don't have to worry about my users accidentally picking up a procedure that's out of date. And the way we handle ensuring that we have the right procedure is here in document revision. So if there is a new revision to this procedure, I would come in here, I would fill in my revision date. I would give a description of that revision, why are we making it, what sections of that document might be impacted, and then I would upload the document. two things happen when I upload that document. Number one, it overwrites the existing document on the system so that only the latest document is available to the user. They can't accidentally download an out-of-date document. They're always going to get the most up-to-date. The other thing is it's going to update the revision and the revision date. And the one thing I do want to point out is you see a document number here. That document number isn't baked in. You can use whatever document numbering system you want. So if you have a document numbering system that you're already using within your company, you could just use that document numbering system right here in Conformance Manager as well. Let's see, let's go to the Requirements tab. A lot of things you can do in the Requirements tab, but let's look at creating a quality plan. You can create as many quality plans as you want for every single product or device that you have within your company. We've got one entered here. This happens to be for a valve. So if we dig into this, let me show you what you got. Now imagine trying to do this, everything I'm going to show you, imagine trying to do this in Excel. It's probably not going to happen. So first thing we have just an overview of this product. Here it is, it's a valve, objectives and deliverables, critical services. But look at all the other information we can input. Design requirements, verification requirements, validation requirements, product specifications, legal requirements, customer requirements, all these different requirements that you can input. You got your documentation. I can upload all the documents that are required for this quality plan, people that are involved, inspection and testing, risk management, all of this right at your fingertips so that when a user comes out, brings up that quality plan, everything they need, including any documents, are right there at their fingertips to upload. All right. Key part of any management system is compliance, and specifically right at the top, no surprise there, is nonconformity and CAPA. So if we go into the nonconformity and CAPA register, this is really what your internal auditors, your external auditors, your customers really want to see, right? They want to know, are you keeping track of nonconformities? What kind of information are you tracking, and how are you dealing them? What is your corrective and preventative action? And we see that right here. Here's our complete list. We can see which ones quickly are open and closed. We can filter any of these. Just for instance, we could look at only open ones or only closed ones. And if we want to drill down into one of them, let's take a look at this first one. We see here is our nonconformance report. This is just kind of an overview of it, but I want to dive in a little bit deeper. So here is where we would input our causes and our CAPA for that nonconformance. So here's our 5 whys. Here's our NCR action, our interim corrective action, our permanent corrective and preventative action, review and follow-up. Remember, help drive ownership and follow-through. That's one of the key aspects of Conformance Manager. Here, we've created an NCR. Now, we can assign who is going to be responsible for follow-up on that NCR. We've put in Bob. We've said that follow-up is required, and we give him a follow-up date. So when I save this, what happens? You know what's coming. 60 days, 30 days, 15 days out, he's going to get an email reminder saying, hey, you got an NCR you got to deal with, get on it, and it's going to put that task into his task list so that when Bob logs in, he's going to see that, that follow-up requirement in his task list. What else under compliance? Let's look at the risk register. So if we look at the risk register, this is a list of all of the risks that we've identified. We can look at one of them here. Here's an overview of this particular risk. It's an order, the risk operation is order entry. Sales personnel may enter the wrong requirements. Who's responsible? Well, Shelley is. Let's look at this. Remember, ownership and follow-through. Mitigation plan, contingency plan. Either one of those. I would fill in the mitigation plan, let's say, and I would assign it to somebody. I'm going to assign it to Lisa, give it a target completion date, and automatically now she's going to get reminders and tasks sent to her that this mitigation plan or contingency plan need to be followed up on. All right, let's look at equipment. Obviously, particularly if you're in manufacturing, it's important that you maintain on a regular basis and have a schedule for maintaining your equipment and calibrating your gauges and so forth, right? So equipment maintenance and calibration, key part of any management system. It's handled here in Conformance Manager right underneath this tab. Just quickly, if we can develop a service schedule. So for a particular group of products, let's say devices. So let's say we have mid-toil calipers of this particular model. We want to calibrate them every year, so that's our interval, and we're going to assign this calibration for these devices to Shelley Johnson. What does that look like on a daily basis? Well, if we go into Register Equipment, when we go to register equipment, this is where we input individual calipers. So we mentioned mid-toil calipers as a group, but we might have 10 mid-toil calipers. And we see them here. They all show up by serial number. So if we had 10 mid-toil calipers, we would see 10 entries by serial number. And if I look into one of those, this is what I wanted to show you. Remember, we said that these calipers had a 1-year service interval, calibration interval. If we look at the service schedule, automatically a service schedule was set up based on the equipment type and the service interval that we already assigned. So you can see March 21st, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, etc. All these were set up automatically. Some admin didn't have to go in and manually enter every single one of these. The software Conformance Manager just went, look, I know you've said that this has got a service interval of such and such. You've just input one, and so based on that date that you input that particular instrument, it now has a service interval set, not service interval, but service schedule set up for it, and all of these were assigned to Shelley, so you got it. Shelley is going to start getting emails and tasks assigned to her as the due date approaches for that particular equipment. Next, let's look at monitoring. The only thing I want to point out here is supplier evaluations. If you've got suppliers, you do want to periodically evaluate them. This is the area where you would do it. So if we look at this first one, let's say, who do we got? Let's say, or top notch. Oh, let's look at this last one, multiple sites. If we go to this one, here we've got just a description of this particular supplier. It's going to have their address, contact, phone number. We can evaluate them based on metrics that we've already created. We can go out and evaluate them on these various metrics. And, this is the key bit, every time we do an evaluation, it gets logged into their history. So we can see this company has been evaluated twice. We see their evaluation history. So at any time we can go out and take a look at how this company has done over time, which might help us decide whether we want to stay with them or not, right? So very useful piece of very useful module here in the Conformance Manager. And finally, let's look at reports. Conformance Manager does a lot of different types of reports. They all work roughly the same. So let's just take a look at this first one here, objectives monitoring. And let's take a look at it for all time. Reports come in kind of two different flavors. You can get a graphical report, or you can get, you have the ability to download the raw data as an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to look at both of those here. So if we look at objectives monitoring, let's look at it graphically. And we can see here, we can look at a number of different objectives, which we've already put into the system. We've got 4 of them here. We could keep adding to this, but let's look internal audit major findings. Here is our target, and here is how we did over time. So we could look at it graphically, or I could just say, hey, let's download the raw data for this. And we can open this up in Excel, and we can see the same data in its raw form in Excel. We could manipulate it in Excel, or maybe we might bring it from Excel into a third-party software and maybe do more in-depth analysis with it if we wanted. So what we've seen here today, or what I hope I've shown you, is the value of this type of management system software. This software is designed to do a specific thing, unlike Excel or Microsoft Word or something else, which is you can get the job done that way, but it's not designed to do it, and it's difficult to get this type of functionality in that, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to drive home here for you. You don't get these automatic reminders and the interconnections between all of these different functions like you do in software that's designed to do specifically that. Your job as a company is to create a good product and service for your customer, not to be a software designer. That's why companies like ISO 9001 Group exist, to create software. And the other advantage I will say, we did mention this was web-based, so you can access it via a phone or a tablet or a PC. And because it's web-based, you don't have to maintain or download updates or install updates. Anytime you log in, obviously, you're going to get whatever the latest version is of Conformance Manager. That's what you're going to access on your device. It's always going to be the latest and greatest. So I hope you go out and take a look at this. I hope you've been thinking about how this compares to what you're currently doing, and maybe it'll make you want to go take a look at it. If you do, you can go to www.iso9001group.com. You'll also see the link there on your page. You can go out there and check it out. You can read about the company and you can read about the product. So that is it for today's Quality Digest Live. Special thanks to Stanley Chow of All In Consulting, and of course to ISO 9001 Group for supplying us with Conformance Manager software. Be sure to check that out. We are going to have a change of format starting on the next show. As many of you know, Mike Richmond has left Quality Digest to join the world of political consulting, political writing, political support. We're wondering if he's crazy, but that's what he loves to do, and that's where he's going. We will still see Mike every now and then, but starting next week, we're going to be doing more of an interview format, kind of what you saw on this show with Stanley Chow, as well as Tech Corners. So if you have ideas for products or interviews that you would like us to do, just send them to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll see what we can do to bring those people or those products on the show. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. That is it, and we will see you next week. So long.